to NEK-TV Rocks, and my guest today is Caleb Grant, and you are the Executive Director of RCT.
I am.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And thank you for coming up here. We know how awful the roads are right now because of the floods. So we understand that we're getting some changes here from RCT. Can you help us figure it out? What's changing, what's different, and how do we negotiate that?
Yeah, so we are fortunate enough, the state in its position hasn't been able to approve a lot of new services. We submitted a CMAQ, or Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality grant application to launch a new service in Newport. We call it RCT Rides. What a lot of other communities call it is microtransit, and are about to, in the next couple weeks, launch microtransit in Newport, which is...
What does that mean?
It is, so I think the most common explanation is a public Uber. So maybe a lot of people around here haven't been exposed to Uber, but
no, but we know it from the internet.
Yes,
not personally.
It's an on-demand vehicle that can pick you up and take you wherever you want within the service area. So we just ran in the past year and a half a pilot in Morrisville and found it to be transformational. So the potential it has to impact the Newport community is significant, and really excited to see what it can do for individuals with mobility needs, or just the desire to utilize public transportation to address climate crisis or convenience, or just have the ability to get places they normally wouldn't.
So if I, as a public person in Newport, have, say, an appointment in St. J, I could call and somebody would come pick me up? And
so that is the limitation of microtransit. So the way microtransit can work is that it stays within a bound area. So
what would be our area?
The service area, as it is currently planned, is just the Newport and Derby area. So there's a long-term plan to expand that a little bit further. The original application included Barton, included Troy, Island Pond, but that was a bit ambitious. And
I like ambition.
So this is our foot in the door. This is our ability to bring the service to the North Country, and with aggressive plans to expand that as we can. So if I could, I'd love to talk a little bit about the Morrisville service and what's that look like for the community. So similarly to the Newport service, which Newport is currently served by what we call in public transportation a fixed route loop.
The Highlander.
The Highlander. So those of you who utilize the Highlander know, you take your schedule, you have to get to the bus stop, at these hours it'll pick you up. It could take you to Walmart as an example, drop you off, and then if you're quick at shopping, you may have to wait a little bit. If you take a while, you may have to kind of get it on the next loop. So you're very dependent on the schedule and that fixed route. The Morrisville area was served by a very similar route. It was called the Morrisville Loop, and it went between what we call, population concentration. So whether it be trailer parks or congregate living facilities, assisted living facilities, it's anywhere when you do the population analysis, you find concentrations of people. And then destinations, which in our area tend to be shopping centers, whether it be a Price Chopper or Walmart. The hospital is another big destination. And you kind of take these high concentrated areas and you figure out the most efficient path between those. So Morrisville was served by that. And typically when you apply that model in Vermont, and especially in rural Vermont, you tend to perpetuate the same cycle. It goes from trailer park to an assisted living facility to Walmart, and it kind of keeps looping that. And that becomes a self-perpetuating loop, right? Because that's where businesses build. I mean, Dollar Generals, they build on fixed route transportation. So what we did in Morrisville and what we're going to do in Newport in the next couple months is you take that fixed loop and you replace it with microtransit. So we do an analysis to check out ridership and demand, and we figure out how many vehicles it would take to replace that fixed route giant bus. And in Morrisville, it came up with one vehicle. And we utilize an e-transit, so an electric vehicle, a transit van that you may see used by either the recreationists coming down from Canada. They use a lot of e-transits to, and Amazon uses them for cargo vans, but ours are specifically designated for ADA compliant public transportation. So you put one of these into circulation, and individuals are now given an enormous amount of choice. They can be picked up anywhere and go anywhere within that service area. So this is a huge change. So whereas with a fixed route, you're limited to going to where those places are on the route when the route is running. With this, you can go anywhere within that service area. So to give some examples, the very first day we ran microtransit service in Morrisville, I was in a local coffee shop right downtown Morrisville and ran into a gentleman who I was very familiar with. He rides RCT all the time. He utilizes our Medicaid services. He unfortunately was in a car accident years ago, and it has a high demand of both physical and mental assistance. And so he rides with us a couple times a week, but he never chooses where he goes. He goes what's approved by Medicaid, he goes by what's demanded by his medical schedule, and on that morning, I ran into him, and we'll call him Frank for discussion's sake. And I go, Frank, did you take microtransit here? And he said absolutely, that he had wanted to come to this coffee shop for a very long time and never had the opportunity to do it. So the difference between fixed route and microtransit, it gives people agency again. You can go to the movies, you can go have lunch with your friends, you can go and yell at your uncle. It doesn't matter, right? It's taking that ability and that assistance to get you where you want to go within a community. So
and they come and pick you up again from there.
And so you can either through our app, so it's an app, RCT Rides. You can download the app and book a trip whenever you want, or you can call us, just like you would with any other RCT service. You call us up, you say, this is when I need to be a place, this is how long it'll be, and depending on the availability of the vehicle, we'll be able to book that. So the thing that I've found remarkable about that Morrisville pilot is when typically you apply the fixed route service to that community, you're going between the Price Chopper, the trailer park, the assisted living facility. Once we gave people choice with the RCT rides, our top locations are the co-op, so the food co-op. So you give people choice where they want to buy their groceries. The food co-op shoots to the top. Hoagie's, which is a local restaurant. And just that idea of giving people access to third place, right? It's the idea, hey, I can go just have lunch with my friends. Capstone, which is a Central Vermont organization, we take a lot of families to English as a second language classes. We take a lot of people to daycare. And the other destination is the courthouse. Right? Because currently there's no public transportation funding to get people to the courthouse.
Isn't it amazing?
And what an opportunity to stop the snowball effect, right? Because whether you're a victim or accused within the judiciary system, not being able to get to those court dates compounds the problems in a significant way. So being able to see that and see the ability for the community to both elevate small businesses, because you're giving consumers choice, to access social services that may not be on fixed route services, and it also expands the real estate opportunities for small businesses and social services. The Newport community, for instance, right now, I mean, you have a phenomenal new mental health facility, the Front Porch facility.
Yeah.
That's not on the fixed route. So at this point, individuals who are seeking that assistance, and what an incredible place,
Have to get there.
they have to get there. With
Right.
microtransit, they'll be able to call us up and say, hey, I have an appointment at this time. I'd love a ride, and we'll be able to take them and pick them up on their schedule. So it's a really incredible opportunity for people to utilize public transportation. At this point, it's free to any individual
Sure.
looking to utilize the services. And it is built around their needs and their schedules. Where there comes challenges to this system is it is a limited fixed resource.
Right.
So if you have to get somewhere, let's say a job, if all the shifts are starting at 8 a.m., those vehicles may not be available at that time.
Right.
Right? Because it's competitive at
Sure.
peak hours. So there is going to be some kind of adjustments as people
Right.
figure out how to schedule it. The beautiful part is that our call center, which if anybody has called RCT to try to get a ride through Medicaid or through
Right.
our program with older adults and persons with disabilities, knows the compassion and the resourcefulness of our call
Yeah.
staff center, are able to call and work through the same process that you
Right.
would for microtransit.
And
So
those programs are still continuing, right?
those are. So that's a really important point,
Yes.
especially for the Newport area, is that microtransit is only replacing that fixed route
Highlander,
service.
yeah.
O&D, or older adults and persons with disabilities program, the Medicaid program, all of that remains in place. So if you're an individual who depends on RCT for transportation to your medical appointments
Right.
through either of those programs, you call the same number and
Right.
most likely you'll just get the exact same service. If microtransit's a good fit for your time and your
Right.
needs, we'll utilize it, but it tends
Right.
to be so individually dependent that it could be under any one of those programs.
Right. And as you know, most of the medical appointments from up here are shipped out. They either
Right.
go to UVM, Dartmouth Hitchcock, or St. J if we're lucky, but you still have to get over Sheffield Heights. So it's really important that the other programs for here continue. So that's reassuring.
It is. And,
Yeah.
RCT just completed our 2024 Transit Development Plan, which is a 5 to 10 year plan for RCT's growth and development and where we're going to develop our program expansion. So one thing that made it into that report and that we will continue to seek funding for is based off of years ago, Vermont State issued an intercity study, which
Yeah.
basically looks at the connectivity between our major population centers. And in that study, they identified Newport as the most isolated of population centers in the state. And so looking at that and trying to figure out RCT, I often get asked, when is RCT going to get a bus route from Newport to St. J? And I've been with RCT for a year and a half now. And when I first started, I asked the exact same questions, right? Because you do your research. I read the
Sure.
intercity study. I looked at our services, and in true spirit of there are no new great ideas, RCT has attempted fixed route services out of Newport numerous times.
Right.
And we don't have the ridership to sustain it.
Right.
Because the downfall of fixed route service is that those buses run that route on that schedule, whether there's people on it or not.
Right.
So we've ran fixed route service from Newport to White River, from Newport to St. Johnsbury, and we
Yeah.
never experienced ridership. So what RCT has proposed in its transit development plan is securing funding with the state or through individual donors to create an intercity on-demand fund. So you could call RCT and say, hey, I have a need to go to Burlington or White River or Montpelier, all these population centers where you can access a multitude of other
Right.
transportation agencies, whether it be Greyhound, whether it be Green Mountain Transportation. And being able to do that on an on-demand basis is the most fiscally efficient way to do that, because you can do it when people need it as opposed to the bus running at will. So that is included in our plan, and in my mind is both the most user-friendly and the most fiscally efficient way to address the intercity issue. So again, that is not to replace O&D or Medicaid transportation. So those individuals needing those specialty medical services will still have those access. This is, hey, I need to get to the airport. I'm looking for transportation. And so that's a big part of that, is how do we supplement what is not appropriate for fixed route services, but still give people public transportation access from the Newport area to other areas. So,
is the airport here talking to you at all? Because they're growing the airport, and that sort of seems like a natural partnership somehow, because people who come into the airport are going to have to get to wherever they're going.
Yeah, and we've had great conversations with them. We provided, in partnership with some great Newport organizations, the Newport Development Group. NDD. And in partnership with them, we're able to provide transportation during totality. So,
so nobody wanted to come into town. They only wanted to stay there and watch it from the airfield.
Well, we had a lot of full buses that it got some people out here, but it was a great opportunity to pilot what that looks like. And luckily with public transportation, I think there are some forward-thinking groups that make transportation part of that equation. So airport development often has a requirement. Act 250 has requirements to contact local public transportation providers. So there are opportunities, although they may be a bit obligatory and may require a little bit of, okay, I've contacted RCT, I've fulfilled my obligation, not necessarily the spirit of wanting to improve that access. But those conversations are a great place to start, because then they get to sit down with me and talk about, okay.
And at least they're happening.
And so as, the airport develops, or, I just took my family and we rode the Memphis-Magog rail trail. And, okay, how does public transportation, support this? We just struck a partnership with SKIDA, the hat company, the winter hat company out of Lyndonville, and Vermont State Park Forever, which is a nonprofit that supports Vermont state parks, to talk about, all right, how do we work with public transportation to access our wonderful state parks system? So I have a huge interest in how do we utilize public transportation to increase quality of life, to allow Vermonters with mobility devices or transportation challenges to access the resources of the state. I mean, we have so many wonderful things, but that disconnect between where people live and what they need is huge. And I think I have so many people who, I was overwhelmed when I moved to Vermont, because transportation becomes that conversational point. In many people's minds, it's the critical constraint of why things aren't working. And what I've found, one is the best transportation solution is prevention. Right? Like if you're calling RCT for transportation, it probably means that there's some other need or basic need that hasn't been fulfilled. Right, you don't have your own wheels. Well, and it's the community doesn't have it, right? Yes. It's I need a ride to Dartmouth because our hospitals up here lack that. And I can't drive. Yeah, or we had mentioned earlier, it's hard to find dentists up here. So all of a sudden now you have a transportation need. Right. So there's all of these other challenges that create a lack of connection, and that's where transportation can either assist in that void or help to kind of elevate programs that currently exist. Will you transport my cat to the vet? That becomes another one, right? Yes. So I don't know if we've gotten that one with RCT rides yet, important. But yeah, and it becomes part of that conversation of good community development. Yeah. How do we make sure that where people live is also livable? Right. Right? Because I think you hear a lot in our discussions about the need for housing in Vermont. But where that happens, and typically the least cost real estate is so far away from the necessities that people need to have a livable experience. And so oftentimes the cost of transportation, either to the individual or to the public through public transportation, is an externally realized cost. And so you see it a lot with human services organizations or our healthcare system, that, you know, if they are doing their calculations, they find that real estate outside of city centers is their most affordable option, but then it creates a transportation need, and that cost is realized by regional providers like
and
myself.
we're an aging town, an aging community. Until we find ways of encouraging younger people to move in here, those of us who are here are aging.
And, you know, COVID showed that not only is our population aging, but the need for mobility devices rose significantly.
Yes, it did.
I can kind of armchair quarterback and say, well, you know, people weren't moving around as much, and, you know, it created a whole nother level of health need. But the reality is that our fleet is ADA compliant, so we have ramps and lifts and all these sort of things, and that demand has gone up significantly. So, you know, we're in the process of right-sizing our fleet, as opposed to, and that's one of the big differences you'll also see in Newport, is that instead of seeing those big buses, you're going to see smaller buses, you're going to see SUVs, you're going to see electric buses, you're going to see a much different looking vehicle than you may be associating with RCT or public transportation. You know, it doesn't make sense for us to be sending around large buses for one or two people.
Wasting the energy and space.
We are. So it's smaller vehicles, it's more agency or choice to the riders, and it's really trying to connect people to the businesses they want to be patrons of, and it's connecting them to their community, wherever that may be, whether it's a cup of coffee or it's a senior meal site. It's about improving quality of life through public transportation and making those connections.
Yeah, I grew up, obviously not around here, in an area where there was a really good public infrastructure of buses. We all rode buses. We didn't have to have our own cars. And then I came to the States, and it was, what do you mean you rode buses? Nobody rides buses. It was very different. And it's fine. I mean, if people want to drive their own cars, obviously I drive mine, you drive yours. But there comes a point in life when that's not a smart move, and particularly as we want to get cars off the road. So this is sounding actually really encouraging. And I'm not suggesting that you're coming up ultimately with a traditional bus network. Right. But maybe somebody will. I mean, they're not mutually exclusive. What you provide is very different.
Right. And, you know, I think if you look at the population just from a statistical standpoint, the large buses don't make a lot of sense because we have such a dispersed population. Right. And, you know, it's a place with a lot of individual needs, and you want to be able to accommodate an individual on their schedule and their basis. So it makes a big difference when you kind of look at the data and you figure out what people need, and building a system that can support that.
So if I asked you to look into your crystal ball, because as a good executive director you obviously have one, what do you see as our transportation future in this area?
Yeah, and luckily I have...
You've got one!
I'm fortunate to have gone through it. So in the past year, RCT has gone through a rebrand, so hopefully in the Newport area you'll see our beautiful new bus shelters and our newly wrapped vehicles, and we had a great design firm, and my instruction to them was bright, clean, and hopeful, and I think they certainly delivered on all of that. We also had a strategic plan to figure out how we can be a stronger organization operationally and culturally. And we also had a transit development plan, which is a thorough analysis of our demographics, our services, our finances. And so I don't have to depend on my crystal ball. I have to depend on a huge amount of research and data analysis. But my goal, and it's a lofty goal with the largest hurdle being finances,
of course,
is to to bring the RCT rides or microtransit model to the whole service area. So that includes the entire Northeast Kingdom and Lamoille County. Because if you can imagine putting into service, so in the Newport area, we are beginning, there's two different models. One says that 2 vehicles could replace the Highlander. One says 3. So completely adaptive to what the community needs. We'll launch those vehicles, but if you start to decentralize our operations and put vehicles in communities like Barton or Troy, into Essex County and Island Pond, you can start to put these smaller vehicles with the RCT rides, and all of a sudden, you know, small businesses can locate in areas that they don't depend on fixed transportation. Individuals maybe don't have to have a car because they can utilize this sort of thing. So I envision a Northeast Kingdom that offers microtransit 7 days a week throughout the Northeast Kingdom, and intercity travel. So you could take the microtransit from Newport to St. Johnsbury, because then we can flip those cars. And one of the really interesting things that I'm hopeful for with this microtransit, and it's the other big difference that riders won't experience, but on my end is truly exciting, is the entire RCT ride service is AI dispatched.
Wow.
And so wherein currently there has to be a 48-hour notice to get a ride with RCT, obviously not on the fixed route, but with our other services, because you call and you put in, hey, I have to go to this appointment at this time, and this is where we picked up, and then it goes to our phenomenal dispatchers. You know, we have 5 dispatchers who sit down with 800 ride requests a day, and they figure out the most efficient ways to use vehicles and this and that. With microtransit, that's all done through AI. So a vehicle that goes from Newport to St. J to drop you off can then be utilized for the next request in St. J. So there's a huge ability to both be gaining efficiencies and flexibility with those vehicles. So with the AI dispatching, one of the frustrations people may experience, especially if you're familiar, if you've lived in Newport your whole life, you could get in an RCT rides vehicle and you'll go down the street and it'll be like, why am I going down this? This is not the fastest way. But the AI is taking you on a route with the highest probability of being able to pick up another person. And so whether you pick up that person or not, it's that probability that you'll be able to serve someone else. And so with the AI dispatching in the Northeast Kingdom, it is using those vehicles in this fluid motion to serve. And that's my mission, right? Is I testified in front of the Senate Transportation Committee, and what I told them, if they're going to take anything away, is that if you give RCT $10, we will give every ride we possibly can with that $10. And so it's whatever fixed amount of funding we're fortunate enough to be able to access, either through sponsorships or individual donations or grants or state funding, we will give as many rides as we possibly can with that funding. And the microtransit across the Northeast Kingdom has proven to be the most efficient way to do that. We calculate things based off of both transit rate per hour, but also cost per rider. And it's proven that the microtransit RCT rides is the least cost model of transportation, significantly lower than fixed routes. So,
and that makes sense.
And we get to serve more people. So in the Newport area, currently, and this is for, if you're sitting there scratching your head, and you know, every time I get on the Highlander, there's plenty of people on there.
Other times there are not.
And so right now the Highlander serves 1,200 to 1,400 individuals a month. That may be the same person riding multiple times, but those are base riders. Microtransit has the ability and the potential to do 1,600 to 2,400 for less money. And so, you know, it makes the most sense, because not only are you giving people the ability to go where they want, but you're doing it for less money, and you get to help more people.
So in our last few minutes, how are Newport area people going to access this information? They know that the Highlander is stopping at the end of this month, but they don't know what happens then.
Yes.
How do they find out?
So we do what we call soft launches.
Yes.
It's what we modeled in Morrisville, and it showed a lot of success, because our priority is to make sure that those who are dependent on the Highlander, the fixed route, are taken care of immediately, right? Because the microtransit or RCT rides has the ability to be accessed by anybody.
Right.
Right. It eventually will be marketed to tourists. It will, I take it places when it makes sense. And so we want to make sure that those who are most used to the Highlander, are most dependent on it, are taken care of first.
Yeah.
So we do that through outreach on the buses, right? Like the best way to figure out, and we're fortunate to be in a small enough community. Everybody knows our drivers,
right,
and our drivers know the riders.
Yes.
So we could, when we did it in Morrisville, we made a list. We know who rides us. Let's make sure that, Phil and Carol are comfortable with this new system. We reach out to people. We make sure our frequent riders are comfortable with the transition. We also have a program manager, our microtransit program manager, Tasa, for the past month has been in human services organizations doing trainings.
Yes.
She goes to congregant living facilities and assisted living facilities. And here's how it works. Here's what you're doing.
And she's coming to Newport, or somebody is.
Yes. So she's been here for the past month.
Yeah.
And, we do it in smaller groups.
Yes.
Because you get to sit down and you get to chat. We did a number of public hearings through the spring.
Yes.
To allow people to contribute to the process and have their voice included in the development of this. And so now it's really in the training phase. We sit down with individuals, make sure they're comfortable, talk about it. And then once those who are most dependent on our services are comfortable, then we start to shout it from the rooftops, right? Because I think you found with other services, the priority is, I want to be on the front page of the newspaper. I want, let's make a big splash about this new service. And my priority is making sure that those who are dependent on it are both comfortable and able to access it before the demand's too high.
That's good.
And so we've been quietly doing it over the past month, doing trainings, familiarizing people. Our drivers are down in Morrisville, driving the service down Morrisville, so there's not as much of a learning curve. They'll get into our vehicles. If you drive by our facility down the road, the RCT Rides vehicles are sitting there, they're waiting, they're ready to hit the road, all the software is ready. So right now it's really just making sure people are comfortable. It's going into their homes, it's sitting down with them, and it's saying, okay, here's the app or here's the phone number, and making sure that everyone's comfortable with that transition.
Can people contact you?
Absolutely. Okay. And it's the beautiful thing about the way Vermont has set up public transportation is we utilize what you call braided services.
Yes.
It's one phone number. And whether it's RCT rides, whether it's a fixed route, whether it's Medicaid, you call us and you say, I need a ride. And it's our obligation to
provide that.
To walk through all the different, we'll figure out the funding model. We'll figure out what the services are available. So it's the same phone number. It's the same group of individuals that, you call up and you get Shauna. And, everybody knows Shauna, and you get to talk to her and, I hear this is a new service and can I go here? And that's a little bit out the service area. And, the thing that I really want to help communicate to the community is this is not this set in stone thing. In Morrisville, we found there was people who really needed the services who were just outside the bubble. So we expanded it. I had a community meeting and I was sitting down and there was a group of seniors from an assisted living facility and they go, we really want to go to the state park. So I ran the data and we included Elmore State Park. And now they can go picnic with their friends and they can access these new things. Our vehicles will fluctuate. I mean, we found that there was a lot of families utilizing our services. Yeah. So we put in more seats into the vehicles. And then we found individuals who they and their friend with a mobility device wanted to go to lunch. So we utilized vehicles that could use multiple either wheelchairs or other mobility devices, so you could allow kind of that socialization and not be limited by that. So the vehicles will change, the service area will change based off the needs and the feedback from the community.
That's great. Thank you so much for coming in. we're out of time. But if we have lots more questions, I assume you're willing to come back sometime.
Anytime.
That's great. Thank you for coming in. The number will go out at the end of this video with your name so that everybody will know who to call.
That's great.
That's great. Thank you for this.
Thank you.
Very helpful.
I appreciate it.